So I do a bunch of things. I've always been interested in doing a bunch of things. As a designer, I'm not necessarily a visual designer or a spatial designer. I like doing both. A lot of times, if there's an opportunity to draw, I'm there. Um, I worked with an architecture studio, Bandook Smith, for a very long time, close to 3 years. And I used to work with them for research. And the research that we were doing was called Architecture is Repair, to sort of look at also how adaptive reuse and strategies of repair can be used in South Asian building practices. All three of them, all three projects are their studio projects. The first one being the Archila Design Library that used to be a tower house, like a private house. So I think in order to also look at the projects in terms of repair, we had to draw them. Like I got to draw them again in terms of process, sort of look at the skeleton of the thing. For Archila, it was more about how does a private space become public and how can you open up a private house into public. So they had a staircase that used to connect, but they also had like a 5-story library that cut through the section of the design itself. The second one is a Haveli project that they did. And the brief was that they procured a 300-year-old Haveli, and instead of like they procured the wood and the ornaments from the 300-year-old Haveli, and they wanted to incorporate it into a new house. So I think in this, the design process was also not necessarily uh, documentation, design, and construction. It was an overlap of everything. As in, when you were documenting, you were also designing. Through designing, when you'd realize that, oh, you need to document this particular section in a certain way, or we designed with a specific wooden detail, but because that was already rotted, we couldn't use it further, like we were not able to preserve it further. So the process was very cyclic. And the last one is row office, which was again a residential house that was made into an office. This sort of came also from the development codes of Ahmedabad, how even though repair does not have any specific codes, there are certain codes that we already have in our development documents that can be reinterpreted for repair and incremental living.
साठी समुद्रकिनाऱ्याचा आवाज.
Is it audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, sorry.
E che produco con le mie mani.
Entouré des personnes que j'aime.
والدفى والحنان والأكل الكتير.
É onde você é livre, onde você pode expressar a sua individualidade.
La mia famiglia, mia sorella e i miei genitori.
आणि घराच्या जेवणाचं चव.
Le concept de home, pour moi, va au-delà d'une demeure physique.
مش بس العائلة بس كمان الحيطان.
Onde você pode relaxar por completo.
وما بيكمل البيت إلا إذا كان في حدا موجود عم يجبرك إنه تاكل أكل كتير.
Me sentir à l'aise dans ma propre peau et pouvoir reprendre mon souffle.
Você pode descansar.
So this is the first project that I did during my master's at the Bartlett. It stemmed from just 3 classmates being very homesick. And the West is also, in terms of food, very individual. You don't really share your food with people. Like a lot of times, it's just your plate. You only eat from your plate. And so 2 of us were Indian and one was Lebanese. And all 3 of us had the idea of having a sharing plate, like sharing your meal. And what we decided to do is just to host a dining table, just to host a lot of East Indian community, which is also a creative community in London, to come to this dining table, experience it, get to meet new people, speak to new people. But when we were trying to do that, we also realized that we couldn't really always be there at the table and guide them through it. So we started to look at if we could use technology to do that. What we did was that we recorded people who would come at the table and sort of their traces and movements at the table. And then this recording was projection mapped onto the surface of a dining table. So when people came to the table already had a choreography where you could either copy what the hands at the table were doing, or we saw some people also try to defy it. And even though everyone knew that it was recording, there were people who were trying to interact with the hands, which is funny to see. Again, what we also tried doing was that the table was also sensor controlled. So there were certain activities that people around the table would do, and only then the recording would move forward. So it also helped because as much as the table was guiding the people were also guiding the table. Um, and then again, to create like invites for it, to create a more common brand or a more common visual for Indian and South Asian and Lebanese culture. Uh, and this was my master's research where we did a studio during my undergrad, which was about off land or water, which took a lot from how do you live with water, especially in a city like Mumbai, which is where I'm from. So water is it is very innately close to me. But um, during that, as much as I love drawing, I also started thinking about that what is the agency of drawing tools in the process of drawing. So my research that year was about, are drawing tools objects or are they things? And I sort of uh, set up this entire research into three factions, which was that drawing tools, when looked at as objects, sort of mediate human body and the external world, whereas when they become things or they have certain kind of a thingness within them, they start influencing the human body and the external world. And lastly, that when you look at the drawing tool as a framework, it starts actively guiding the rules of human body and the external world, which is something that co-evolution and co-creation is now like a post-human theory. Um, and then I was also, because as much as I was interested in land or water, I started looking at how water has been drawn or represented over the years. This is an archive that was created by Olivia Vane, which was about which was how through old maps water has been drawn as hatches or water lines and dots. And what else is, how else can you draw water? Uh, and then lastly, this was this was my final project. I made a drawing apparatus because I wanted to take away the idea of the human agency. I thought if I could use data that was already available about rainfall in Mumbai and make it into like a self-automated machine that drips ink based on how rainfall is generated from 1980s to 2020, and then map it onto a contour. So this was drip. A lot, few of these images have been taken by Ankita. Thank you. And as much as the apparatus was a huge part of it, so was the terrain on which the ink was mapping itself. I used a lot of materials. I started with using perishable materials as to how ink or water could change it or rot it over time. I used paper, I used textile, and at the end of it, I came to ink. And then ink also I tried with cloth. But then in a very different project, I used biogel. And there's a good quality of biogel is that when you make it in certain consistencies, if water is sort of added to that consistency or added over, sometimes it becomes the soaking is different. So the patterns are different. So I ended up using biogel. So every contour of Mumbai was sort of casted in a different formula of biogel so that the soaking could be different. And this was just a document because this process was so long and so many materials were used in it. This was a process to sort of look at how many materials were used and why were they used, why was a specific material used for a specific terrain. And this was kept with the project so that people could look at not just the moment of the project, but like 15 months that went into making it. The last thing that I worked on was also after I got the video of the ink, I started experimenting a little with OpenCV Python and sort of trying to blob track the entire video. When I blob tracked it, I realized that there were 10 specific kinds of ink splatters that were recurring over and over again. And that allowed me to make like a smaller data set of like, okay, these are 10 most recurrent blobs. And then based on that, because the experiment was a pixel version of Mumbai, I converted the pixels into geographical coordinates. So as in when you got a pixel coordinate of the blob, you also got a geographical coordinate of the blob. So it started from Mumbai, and then through materials, it ended in Mumbai. I think the reason, one thing about the project was also when I was doing my research, it was about how do you archive a certain thing. And most of the times, a lot of the critique is about how when you archive something, you can't completely archive something. Like it feels so unfinished. But when I was reading Jane Bennett, I realized that how she talks about thingness as vibrant matter, or that objects can be vibrant matter. I started thinking about that maybe it's intentional that these entanglements are created. Because if you go through one medium, you would always reach another one, and then another one, and then another one. And that's probably the way of, because a lot of times during my project, I was asked, why am I doing this? What am I trying to do? And I think for me, it was just to create as many entanglements as I can. So it started from data of numbers and land, and then was made into a material. And I don't know how it will pan out next. But yeah, hopefully I push this forward into a more bio-digital. So as much as I don't know what my terrain is, I think I know the materiality that I want to work with this time around. And that's all.
So I've basically picked out two projects, and I was just I haven't picked out the maps and all, but basically I was just looking at interesting ways of mapping that could be used. Yeah, this is my first project. This was my semester 9 project called Creating the Montage City by architects Samira Rathod and Yash Gorecha. So basically, what the pedagogic intent was to kind of think through the idea of film and how this kind of compositional quality mirrors in between filmmaking and architecture. So, we were kind of looking at films and then applying them on sites basically. So this was a project centered around Mumbai. We had several sites, and then we looked at a lot of movies. So these are some of the movies we looked at. We had a group viewing sessions also, and then we picked out each individual movies that we could work with. So the movie I picked was this one, A Ghost in a Shell, which is this 90s anime movie, cyberpunk, a very philosophical movie about rebirth and death. So yeah, I mean, a great selection of movies, and this was mine. So these are just some few frames that I selected and kind of started working with. How can this quality, this feeling that you see through the frame can be imitated by architecture? So again, these are some of the various frames that we picked out, and then we kind of deconstructed the various shots that happen throughout the movie. So I mean, we did an entire half of the semester was, I think, spent on the movie analysis, where we kind of picked out each kind of the method the filmmaker uses to establish his shots. So, there's a use of perspective, negative space, kind of these long panning shots that give you space to breathe. Basically, because it's an animation, everything is kind of uh, meticulous and hand created, so that was something we were really working with. So then we picked out sites. We had a lot of different sites from Mumbai, from Kalba Devi to Nala Sopara, and this was mine, which was the Edward Cinema in Kalba Devi, basically. So this is an old, decrepit cinema with themes of nostalgia, and now it's kind of used only for movie shootings. I don't think there's any actual use of theater being used. So the process that we kind of began with was the site sketches that we went out, and we kind of mapped out this decay of the site. If you can see in some of the pictures, the slow decay that kind of crops up in the building. Then what we did was we kind of created these memory drawings where we came back home, and then we kind of just through our memory kind of created these phenomenological drawings where you how you experience the space, basically. So this is kind of me walking through this narrow tunnel, then there's the shadow of trees kind of walking over here. It was basically a lot of layering. So this can be sort of my pathway through the site, and this can be how the shadow of the building falls upon me. So a lot of layering, and then there was of course the actual site drawings, how the site actually is. So we kind of picked out these blocks within the city, and we kind of started zooming in through each different layers. And what we did was, because we were like 7 people, and what we did was kind of try to stitch these sites together to kind of create interesting conversations between these sites themselves. So it was kind of like a collage city of various parts of Mumbai kind of stitched together and creating this idea of a montage city. So this is our process work. And of course, we went through a lot of iterations. So the red ones are the side, basically, and the black one is the surrounding. And we were kind of playing how the different, how they can react to each other, basically. So yeah, I mean, I think this was the final one that was chosen because there was a lot of green space also. There was the sea on one side, and then we kind of decided to work with that. This is the 3D of the same. Yeah. So this was kind of my side. I won't elaborate on it too much, but you can see the Edward Cinema kind of exploded. My site, the program I eventually worked with was Film Archive, which also had a whole elaborate process that I won't get into. But yeah, these are basically the uh, actual drawings, and you can there are some parts of it which is kind of difficult to explain, but how each part reacts to a different part of the city, and even some of the compositional qualities of the film, like how, say, the narrowness of a certain frame can be felt through within the building itself. And we used kind of this retrofit in between the courtyard of the three buildings, where it was like creating a conversation between the existing sites and with something new entirely. Yeah. So this was my first project, and the second was my thesis, which was about retrofitting the Wagah border. So again, a very difficult site to kind of work with, and I think the way I kind of went about it was slightly different, because it's a very maybe a bit provocative site, and because there was so much security there, I couldn't actually map the area out. So uh, the way I kind of began into this journey was, I mean, I didn't start out with this. I was just kind of mapping. I began with a very simple inquiry on, body in architecture and how it's viewed in architecture. And this is basically, how each architect has drawn the human body in their drawings throughout time. So I was looking at that, which then led me to this book called The Mass Ornament by Siegfried Kracker. And he basically talks about how this orchestration of the human body by architects and by filmmakers is kind of used by figures of authority in a very perverse manner. So I created a lot of drawing based on that, a very anthropomorph anthropomizing my ideas, how the body is kind of used by these states. I mean, I won't explain each of these drawings, but these are from my thesis book, basically. These are inspired by this Korean artist named Kim Jung-gi, who is kind of an artist I really look to. He has this very maximalist view, and I kind of tried to imitate that, basically. And so the way I went about kind of mapping this site out was something called the arrival sequence, which was a method created by Gordon Cullen in his book called Townscapes, where you basically kind of create this stretch where you walk a certain distance and you draw what is in front of you, and then you keep doing that until the entire site. So, because this was so much related on body and how I feel as I'm going through this site, that's what I did. So I mean, you should ideally, it's better if you take a longer look, but you can see how it's kind of like an animation as you're walking through the site. So if you see, this is kind of the main axis of the Grand Trunk Road, and this is how I've mapped basically how I've visited the site inside the kind of crowds you see. And yeah, this was basically the building that I ended up with. So this was like a very slow pavilion that it's like an anti-pavilion that's responding to the existing pavilion. And you can again see how the mapping directly is seen within the form, where you kind of slowly walk towards something, and the next piece is immediately inferred by what you see. Yeah. These are, of course, some of the site renders that I made, where you can see this is basically the before, how the site actually exists, and the after, and in the center are some of the renders of the various spaces created within. Of course, I mean, probably very Bartlett inspired, as you can see. And my kind of final synthesis drawing was also an arrival sequence, where I basically mapped out how I would walk through my own building that is in my head, and how I would see through how my body would experience, the various sites, various spaces within the site itself. Yeah, that is it.